Hey y'all, welcome back to Most of It. And before this video starts, I really want to thank you all for the support that you've been showing me. This channel's been growing way faster than I thought it would, and I know I say it a lot, but thank you so much for tuning in and commenting and for helping me build a little community here where we just talk about stuff we enjoy. So one last time, thank you. Anyway, if you've been watching me for a while, you probably know that I like dwarves. I find their culture and attitudes appeal to me very heavily. And if you've been watching me at all, you probably also know that I like Warhammer. So I was of course very happy when I was first getting into 40k and found out about the Leagues of Votann. 40k dwarves are right up my alley, and with the new minis that were recently announced, I figured, why not talk about them? So that's what I'm gonna do today. So despite being one of the newest factions on the tabletop, the Leagues are actually really old in lore. Before they became the space dwarves we know them as now, they were humans. During the Dark Age of technology, when humanity was reaching for the stars and colonizing worlds, a group decided that this was their chance to get rich. They boarded massive ships called Long March vessels and struck out for a place known as the Galactic core, which was known for its high amount of valuable ores as well as being very treacherous. Well, aboard these ships, there were these AIs called the Votann, and they were in charge of typical AI stuff like retaining data and managing ship operations. But they were also responsible for the humans' main method of continued life, cloning. Rather than depend on people to reproduce and have to deal with that hassle, just have them hop in a clone pod when they get old, and bam, they're back younger and ready to get back to work. So these people make it to the Galactic core and start mining. Well, the environment of the core isn't exactly hospitable to human life. Its gravity was much stronger than Terra's, and its radiation was also pretty hazardous. The first generation of these people in modern 40k are referred to as the first ancestors, and they were home to the majority of both mutations and what the Leagues call clone skines, which are essentially mutations that assist with adaptation to your surroundings. Well, the Votann saw that the humans could be better adapted to the core and began altering the clones, so rather than make another normal human, they would make a stronger, denser being that could deal with the hazards of the core. This started off kind of subtle at first, but over time the humans became more similar to what we know them as, boasting stronger muscles, squattier stature, and higher resilience than the average human. Well, for whatever reason, these guys never returned to Terra, so they missed out on everything that happened there, but over thousands of years, the people began dividing themselves into what they called kindreds. Being clones of previous people, they of course share a super strong bond, and are pretty much what we would call a family unit. And from this, they begin referring to themselves as the kin. So what happens when a bunch of kindreds work together? Well, that's when you get what's called a league, and this is where they get their name from. There are a lot of different leagues, like the Greater Thurian League and the Ymir Conglomerate, and each league has its own Votann, which by this point began being referred to as the ancestor cores. The leagues had forgotten a lot of their origins, but that was okay because the Votann would remember for them. The once basic shipborne AIs had become sentient by this point, but unlike most sentient AI stories, the Votann were pretty chill. They continued to do their job of cloning and cataloging data, and over time the kin began seeing these beings that literally gave them life, not as machines, but rather as beings of mythic scale, with them almost worshipping them. The kin have a cool mix of technology and superstition, and one aspect of that is clear in the Grimnir. These guys are the ones that, through use of something called a Fane, are able to communicate with the ancestor cores, and they are universally respected and often revered. So anyway, tens of thousands of years pass, the kin get stronger and shorter, the leagues grow and expand to different worlds and begin trading both with each other and even with other friendly alien races, and through it all, the Votann are watching and learning. They absorb data about their surroundings, new technology, and even keep records of genetics of the kin for continued cloning. Well, despite being very capable AIs, the sheer length of time and amount of recorded data begins to slow the Votann down and they start deteriorating. This of course doesn't happen overnight, but rather is a slow but consistent process over the League's existence. This does, however, spell certain eventual doom for them, as once the Votann die, the kin will eventually go extinct. This makes the League's main goal to keep the Votann alive, as pretty much everything that they have and need come from them. When someone dies, they are converted into data by the Votann, and they absorb all of that person's knowledge and then reclone them. So the Votann are essentially huge libraries of everything the Leagues have ever done or known, which makes them invaluable to pretty much anyone in the galaxy. But you may be asking, what happens when a Votann dies? Well, I couldn't find a case in lore where that's happened without its kin also being destroyed along with it, but the inverse has happened, where all the kin were destroyed and the core survived, and it's kind of a sad story. There's a group that were attacked by the Tyranids and they all got eaten, but of course the core didn't have any biomass, so it got left alone. And to this day, other kin are warned to never go near that Votann because it went insane all by itself. And if you go near it, you would hear the insane screams of a sentient machine all alone in the darkness. But anyway, the Leagues continue to mine and grow and establish trade routes, but they do mostly stay in the Galactic core. They're dwarves, which aren't exactly known for being extroverts, and despite at this point being larger than both the Tau and Eldar empires, they remain pretty secluded. But they do eventually run into humanity, and by this point the Imperium's in full swing. The best number I could find for when they met was in the 41st millennium, but it's believed that they unknowingly met multiple times before that, with the Imperium referring to the kin as abhumans or squats. But now the Imperium refers to them as the Demiurge, which the kin find kind of funny. You see, the Imperium has no records about the League's origins, but the Votann do. Through the Votann, the kin know that they have very ancient ties with Terra, and they see this as a secret that should be guarded heavily. They believe that if the Imperium ever found out, that they would try to lay claim to the kin civilization, and so they keep their history to themselves and are always on their guard when dealing with humanity. So that's a quick rundown of their lore and origins, and in the current setting, the Leagues are just like everyone else, having fought in a lot of wars against a lot of foes, but they hold a special contempt for the orcs, who they fight the most. The kin highly value stuff like community and the passing on of heritage, and obviously the orcs are kind of the opposite. So now I guess I'll talk a little bit about what the kin think of the other factions. You know they hate the orcs, but not far behind them are the forces of chaos, who kind of confuse the Leagues. They see them as backwards and disgusting, having pledged themselves to forces that value nothing more than the sowing of chaos and destruction. The kin were seemingly altered by the cloning operations, not just physically but also spiritually and mentally, with their souls shining dimmer than even a normal humans in the warp. This has made them to be one of the most chaos-resistant groups in the galaxy, as well as viewing the Imperium as a waste of time, and they mostly stay away from it with only the Grimnir unknowingly utilizing it. The kin, as with most everyone else in the setting, also hate the Tyranids, referring to them as the Bane. They are hated but also kind of respected, like a normal human does with a wild animal. They also don't like the Necrons, as they have on occasion stumbled on a tomb world or two, and that's just no fun for anybody. Humanity, as I said before, are a group the kin are generally wary of, but they have allied with them almost as often as they've fought them. The Leagues are generally willing to work with anyone as long as they A. aren't getting taken advantage of, and B. it benefits them. They don't like the AdMech though. The kin are one of the few groups that actually develop new technology, and so they see the Mechanicum as like the tech version of cavemen, using technology with superstition rather than progressing. But they also dislike them because the ancestor cores are essentially just massive ancient STCs, and if the Mechanicum ever found out about that, then it would be all out war for them to try and claim them. So you may be saying, man, are there anyone these guys like? Yes, kinda. I wouldn't say the kin like anyone outside of themselves, but they do maintain mostly polite relationships with both the Tau Empire and the Eldari, with them trading frequently. But they don't like the Drukhari, based, and have no patience for the Asuryani's arrogance, super based. So now I guess I should talk a little bit about the kin's tech and weaponry, and one really unique aspect of them is that they actually use robots and AI in their weaponry. They have something called the Ironkin, which are sentient, self-aware robots that, interestingly enough, are treated and valued as full citizens of the Leagues. Yeah, they essentially made artificial people and treat them equally, which I find really cool. You wouldn't expect the Grumpy Dwarf faction to do something that wholesome, and I like it. They of course also have the more standard non-thinking robots called cogs, and they do your standard servitor tier stuff. The kin's armor are essentially just slightly retooled space/mining suits called void armor. These suits are actually generally considered to be better than Space Marine plate, and they even have their own Terminator equivalents called exo armor, which are exactly what it sounds like, just an armored exosuit. The kin fight with weapons similar on technology level to the Tau, but with a much stronger focus on melee with stuff like swords and hammers. They utilize a lot of Dark Age of technology weaponry, which makes them a force to be reckoned with, and they were even the ones to introduce the Tau to ion weaponry, but they obviously kept the best stuff to themselves. They are extremely straightforward with their weaponry, which means they have a lot of hyper-specialized things for very specific jobs. As far as travel goes, the kin use essentially just better versions of what the Imperium does, with warp drives and the like, but rather than going through the warp for the whole trip, they make tiny in and out FTL jumps which allow for the use of computers rather than psychic navigators. As far as physicality goes, most warriors, called the Hearthkin, on a scale of raw strength are as strong as Space Marines. This combined with their superior armor and weaponry have made them a difficult threat on multiple occasions for the Imperium, but they aren't exactly known for their speed, which is something most Marines are quick to exploit. Humans that have fought the kin have said that it's like fighting a mountain. The more you strike it, the more it settles into itself, and when it does finally move, they're like an unstoppable rocky avalanche. The kin are highly pragmatic and will most of the time do what makes the most sense and has the best possible outcome. If the juice isn't worth the squeeze, they don't try, or give up and move on. They see spending lives as something you only do when you have to, which makes them one of the more sensible factions in my opinion. But whatever you do not, I repeat, do not get on their bad side. Being dwarves, the kin are known for holding grudges, which they define as a marker for one that must be destroyed no matter the cost. Typically, this is as vengeance for an insult or action, and despite their above-average patience, the kin will absolutely crash out if you give them a reason to. One thing I really like about the kin is, I'd say, they're the only faction in 40k that truly just wants to be left alone and to do their own thing. I think if you have something they want and are reasonable, they will gladly trade with you, and then go about their day mining and trading with those they see as worth their time. The kin strike me as like an old guy that is friendly in a very grumpy way, if that makes sense. Just be polite to them, and they'll give you the same courtesy. Despite being larger than the Tau or the Eldar, if they were left alone, I'd say they wouldn't really be much of a problem for anyone other than like the Orcs or Tyranids. But of course, this is 40k, and that'll never happen. Overall, I really like the Leagues of Votann. I just really need some more books about them before they become one of my favorites. Thanks for watching, y'all. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and comment down below what topics or characters you'd like to see me cover next. And be sure to check out my community tab where I'm currently running weekly Primarch battle brackets. And with all that said, I'll see y'all later.